G'day all, Happy New Year. It's 2026, recording what will now be the first podcast of the year. That should have been the last podcast of the year. The plan was over the Christmas break to film this back on my in-laws' farm near Tamora. A couple cows in the background, sheep, I guess a farmy, kind of homely, reflective end of year feel. But the weather wasn't on our side. It was actually crazy windy and kind of a little bit out of character for that area at the time of the year. So we decided to wait, film it back in. I'm in my brother-in-law's office at home so that the audio quality was nice for everyone. So the idea behind this episode is I asked every one of my guests from 2025 to ask me a question. So a little Uno reverse. And basically 75%, 80% of them got back to me with a question in time. And so I'm going to answer all of those in as much detail as I possibly can. And what I hope to be quite a reflective and thoughtful episode that maybe just reveals a little bit of what my last year has been like and what I'm hoping to have for the year ahead. So let's roll. In no particular order, Chris Griffin, he asked, by the way, my notes are on my phone, so I'm not being rude here. He says, what will be the one thing that will hold you back in 2026? The answer to this, I had to think about this because I don't think so much. Of course, there's fears and worries and stresses. It's a natural part of being a human and living life and trying to strive for something that you currently don't have or want more of. I guess the answer for me is probably energetic intelligence. What I mean by that is being able to gauge where I am with my energy. Last year I did a lot. I packed a lot into a 50, 45 week working year in which, Soph and I were away for a little bit for our wedding and honeymoon, and a couple other things happen along the way and life gets busy. But in the 50, 45 weeks that I was working, it felt jam-packed. I wrote a book, which I haven't talked a lot about on the podcast, or definitely not so much on socials yet. But I wrote a book that'll be published and on shelves mid-2026 with Simon & Schuster, which I'm really proud of. I wrote every single one of the 62,000 words. Have gone through all the editing process with my team. So it's all me. It's completely original from my dome to the paper that you'll be reading it on. And man, it was a lot. I didn't realize how much it would be to chew off that project, which I gave myself around 4 months for, on top of, working full time in real estate, hosting the podcast, in which I've been up and back to Sydney once or twice a week for, 2 to 3 episodes a week that we record, and then of course the one that we edit and put out, which I'd been doing all by myself up until the last month that my wife Soph has now started editing the show. It just felt like a lot. Speaking engagements, a bunch of other things, and that's not me complaining, because of course I chose to take on the book as a project when I was approached about it, and I said yes, and I was excited. I don't think I realised how much it would be on top of all of the other stuff I had going on, as well as going away and getting married and all that good stuff. And so it was a year that stretched me and tested me. And when I say tested me, it tested my energy, because at times I was just so fatigued. And ultimately what it's led to is this last 2 or 3 months, I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to go into the depths and the details of it because I don't really understand it myself, but some kind of virus or health challenge. It's really just fatigued me and absolutely knocked the wind out of me for 2 or 3 months, in which some days I don't feel like I can get off a lounge, and other days I feel like I'm, getting my energy back and I'm like, great, I'm on track again. And the next 4 days I'm slogged. So energetic intelligence, understanding that there are days to put the foot on the gas and there are days to pump the brakes and put the feet up in a hammock. And so I feel like this year has been a bit of a lesson in that. Also a lesson in, I guess the energetic intelligence, the idea behind that is, I said at the end of 2024 when I did an episode with my 2 closest mates, Joey and Ferns, I said that the one thing I really wanted to take into this year, or one of the few things this year that's passed, was that you can't rush with intention. When you are on the go, consistently moving at pace all the time, you miss the little bits of life that are crucial for fulfillment and enjoyment. And I feel like I didn't honour that in 2025. I kind of had the blinkers on and it was go, go, go. And really the only period of the year in which I slowed down and allowed myself to enjoy appreciate, look around, and be super present was my wedding and my honeymoon. And of course, they're extreme circumstances in which you are, in our case, over in Europe, seeing places you've never seen before, experiencing things and food and feelings you've never had before with a person that you love more than anything in the world. And so it is rich in all of the good things. It's no surprise, though, that was like the most enjoyable and memorable 5 weeks of my year. And so more of that, but on a lesser scale. More of that in the day-to-day, the Sundays, the time in which, I choose to just clock off, enjoy and relax and, importantly, recharge and recover. And so this year there's no kind of extreme goals for, extreme running challenges, or I say extreme running challenges by my standards, no marathons planned for this year, no silly, crazy workout routines or anything. It's more about balancing my energy, respecting it, getting back to, at times, stillness and slowness, and letting go of the need to strive outside of myself all the time. And sometimes just lean into a little less with a whole lot more presence, intention, enjoyment, fulfillment. That is a plan this year. So Chris, to answer your question, I think that if I can learn energetic intelligence, that I can really squeeze the juice out of the important things this year and, ultimately, hopefully, in a perfect world, make 2026 the best. Samuel Dreyfus, what do you know to be true that most other people would call you crazy for? This one is a personal truth. I would say, to answer your question in the most honest way that I can, is that I believe I'm the luckiest man on earth. The reason I think people would call me crazy for that is because of the set of health circumstances in which I've been born with. Cystic fibrosis, liver disease, portal hypertension, type 3 or cystic fibrosis related diabetes. Certainly not the easiest can of worms to open up, and certainly at times have come with plenty of challenges and tests. But for some reason, in some way, those challenges and the way that they have molded me, the character of who I believe I am and the values in which I hold close to my heart and close to, who I am, the fabric of who I am as a human being, have made me what I deem to be the luckiest man alive, particularly because of the people that I've connected with and the closeness of those relationships. I probably sound like a broken record on here talking about my wife and my family and my group of friends, but, I don't think you can call that anything else but luck. I'm just so blessed to have so many brilliant, amazing, beautiful people so close to me, in which I've enjoyed just the fullness of life and the love and the trust and all of that, which I think makes life so rich and so beautiful. And so, I think that sometimes our greatest challenges make us who we are, and ultimately who we are dictates the way that we perceive and receive the world. And, I'm receiving the world as what I deem to be the luckiest man alive. Drew Harrisburg, is there anything you have always wanted to say or haven't had the courage to say live on the podcast? I really thought about this one for a while, Drew, and it challenged me. This is probably the question that challenged me the most, because I, for the most part, believe I've been very open, honest, and relaxed in sharing what I believe to be my truest opinions and thoughts. I don't believe, I really resonate with what Richard de Crepigny said on the podcast just a few weeks ago now, that I don't think we need to have an opinion on everything. So I certainly, there's things that sometimes I feel or I think that I don't necessarily believe I yet need to voice or have an opinion on, because my opinion isn't solid or cemented yet. So I'm sure over the course of the next couple of years, especially there's a lot politically, socially that's happening in our country and the Western world at the moment that, I've got plenty of thoughts and feelings on, but not yet formed or solid opinions. But if I come back to the personal, I would say that for a long time, I felt that I needed to achieve something of significance to make sense of my place in the world. Kind of a need for external validation, or more so maybe external success. I think I was terrified of the idea that if I wasn't seen as significant or special, that I'd somewhat wasted the opportunity I'd been given. I think to go back to, and not to be a broken record once again, but to go back to the health experiences and the challenges of which I've been afforded, I think that when you overcome things like that and you're given that kind of challenge or experience, this belief that it's for a bigger reason that I think at times we carry, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in an answer to one of my other questions, but this idea that like it needs to be for something. And I think that when you think that and you have that kind of belief system in place, you then long for something bigger, and bigger in the sense of bigger external achievement in which people will clap you for, applaud you for, praise you for, because it makes it feel like those significant challenges have all been for something. And I hope I didn't make an absolute mess of that and mumble it. But I think, and I know what I'm beginning to learn is that I say the older I've got, I'll be 30 in April this year, 30 on the 12th of April 2026. And over the last couple of years in particular, I've really started to realize that it's the most simple things in my life that give me the most significance and have been the most meaningful. And so I think that I never had the courage to be open about feeling like I needed so much achievement outside of myself, that I needed to stack so many trophies, or that I needed to be seen as impressive because of my podcast or my body of work. I think for a long time I went around trying to explain to people what I was doing to make it feel significant. A good friend of mine, Zach, once said to me in a cafe, he said, every time you tell somebody about the podcast, when somebody asks, you talk about all the people you've had on and how incredible that they are. And it's almost like you're trying to explain to people that this thing is important, it's significant, that it's being done to an impressive level. He said it's okay just to be proud of it regardless of what people think. And, I remember that, and he's one of the most self-assured, confident guys I know. And I found that to be quite an interesting point because, I do. I have a little bit of a habit of, whether I know it or not, trying to receive the validation to say that, hey, this is a big thing, this is impressive, this is important. And so I think the older I'm getting, the more life experience I'm having, the more sure I'm becoming of myself without being certain of all things. I think you require less of that. You don't need to be understood. You're okay being misunderstood, maybe misappreciated or underappreciated at times, because you recognize that the most simple things in which you don't have to question every day, the things that ultimately hold the most significance personally. So thanks for the question, Drew. That was a nice challenge. Dave Hoey. If the world had to take everything away from you but one thing, and you had to build the rest back up from it, what would it be? Easily, family. But if I had to be more specific, my wife. I think that at the core of who we are as humans are the relationships that are closest to us, that have the most significance. And I think that if you stripped me of all my achievements, all my values, my sense of self-worth, my health even, I think that I could build it all back up with the right people around me. I think that who we lean on, our community, the people who remind us who we are, what we've been through, what we're able to achieve, are the most important pieces of our life. They are the cornerstones. And so, simply put, my wife and my family are that one thing that I hold so dearly. The rest is ephemeral and transitory. It will come and it will go. This thing, as much as I love it so much, may one day be something I don't love and appreciate so much. Success comes and goes. It can be taken from you. Your people, though, the place they hold in your heart, I think that is the most special thing. And of course, we are mortal as human beings. And so those people aren't here forever. And sometimes over the course of time, those relationships change. But I believe when you have those true, strong connections, it can power you through anything. So that's my one thing. Sarah Grinberg, what do you think we need to remember or return to for Australia to feel cohesive and peaceful again? Yeah, this is a really, really interesting question because, of course, some sad times over the course of the last couple of months in Australia. The horrific terror attack in Bondi, which I think for most Aussies, I should say, can speak about this and say that it was crushing. Whether you were involved, whether you were there, whether you lived close to it or knew somebody who lived close to it, I don't think mattered. I think that as a country, when you see that happen in a place like Australia, in which for most of your life you have felt so safe and secure, it really crushes you emotionally. But there's something in it that rears up the spirit of who we are as Aussies. It certainly did in me, where I was so angry for the first 48 hours, and then I seen how the community came together, and I'm like, man, this is so powerful. Because after these moments in which you would never wish upon a country, a group of people, a place, a time in history, what we often see on the other side of it is that unity again. And I feel like we've seen a little bit of that in Oz over the course of the last couple of months, after what I believe to have been the last couple of years of a lot of disunity, a lot of disconnection, a lot of divide. And so what do we need to remember or return to? Well, I think for our politicians, they need to remember that, this is not high school. If your efforts to achieve greater approval ratings or to try and achieve, I guess, what you would call a sense of popularity across the country, if that is your number one goal, then you're ultimately failing the country. Yes, popularity can be the byproduct of doing things really well as a politician, but ultimately politicians have to be comfortable with hard choices being made and at some time approval ratings dropping. I think that we have tried so hard to be seen as correct, and I'm not speaking about any particular matter here, but correct in all ways, in all forms, at all times, that we have ultimately at times failed the country, failed the people who live here and call it home. And I think that we have hard choices ahead of us. And I think that as the people who vote for politicians, whilst we need to encourage that kind of action, we also need to be patient that it's going to take time to change things. I don't think we can expect change overnight. I think even if the perfect decisions are made, change doesn't happen instantly. It happens over time. And so what do we need to return to? Well, we need to band together as people. I think we need to be really proud of this nation, despite the fact that, it's had its ups and downs over time. Every country does. You have to remember we were at war with different countries over the course of the last few centuries. And ultimately, as time passes, we forgive those past transgressions to move forward peacefully, to create unity again. And I think that we have to forgive ourselves for our wrongdoings in the past, do our best to correct those things, and make haste into a future that is better for everyone, a future in which we're more connected as people who live in Australia, the citizens of this country who are proud of this country, who celebrate it like it should be celebrated, because it has the best healthcare in the world, some of the best opportunities, some of the most beautiful places to live, to breathe, to experience, to see. And so I would love a little bit more pride in our nation, but also a bit more backbone from our politicians who are okay with a momentary decline of popularity for future prosperity of the country. I think when you are elected into a position like Prime Minister, you are responsible not for being re-elected again, but for doing what you have to do to further progress the country. And that doesn't always mean everyone will believe it's right. Thanks, Sarah. Max Kruger. How have you balanced relationships and work throughout the year? Or throughout your career, sorry. Or is there a lesson you've learned around it? I'd say that I've balanced relationships really well. The lesson I've learned is probably to take more time out of work. Like I said, last year was really busy, and for a huge portion of the year, I was working 7 days. And looking back, I wish I took more Sundays off to just hang out with Soph and have unstructured hangout time. But we make up for that with amazing mornings and evenings. And, our 5-week holiday, honeymoon, wedding, all of those things. But I think taking more unstructured time out of my life for the really close relationships, but also for the friendships. But ultimately, I think I've balanced it really well. As I alluded to in one of my answers before, family, friendships, connections are the most important thing to me. And so I always hold them really close to heart. And if I feel like those things are slipping, my reflex action, my second nature is pretty quick to get me back to more time with those people. Billy Smith, where do you see yourself / hope to see yourself in 10 years? Ultimately, when I think about that big picture, the first thing that comes to my mind is, as a dad and a husband, ultimately just a family man. These things, career, of course, I hope this thing keeps progressing and, maybe there's a few more books on my personal bookshelf that I've written. Maybe there is, 1,000, hopefully more by then, another 2,000 podcasts there in the library for you guys to listen to, and a whole heap of other things that I'm really proud of achievement-wise. But more than anything, it's just a couple of kids, great memories, in great health, and I think all those things are certainly in the very near future for us and things that we're working towards. I love that question though. It gives me a lot of joy when I think about that. Ultimately brings a smile to my face thinking about, me as an old man in the future. I say old man, me and my dad, I call him my old boy. As an old boy in the future, being a dad for a couple kids and, living that life is something I'm really excited for. And I feel is, going to be full of challenges and full of tests, but also full of growth. And, ultimately family is the value in which I hold the closest. And so having one of my own is certainly the biggest priority on our list for Soph and I at the moment. Dom Alyssa, if you could wish for one thing to change in the world, what would it be? Another really challenging question, Dom. I think just to get to a place of unity again. I certainly want to travel a lot more over the course of the next couple of years after such a great trip this year. And I think when you travel, you want to, not just for this selfish reason, but, to travel, I think the world has to be in a place of unity and peace. And I love connecting with people from other cultures. I love going and seeing things I've never seen before and having those kind of cultural experiences that are new and fresh and exciting. And I think that when the world is in a good place, that resonates, and it's such a beautiful experience when you're in another person's country, enjoying the kind of lifestyle that they lead and have and respecting that. And so, I'd love to do more travel over the next couple of years, and I think it'd be great to do that from a place of the world being in peace and prosperity. Too many beautiful people and places out there for us not to be. Steve Chapman, what is the biggest, most impactful thing you changed your mind on this year because of a podcast guest conversation? That's a great question. I had a few questions of a similar nature to this, like lesson from a podcast guest or etc. So I'm going to try and answer these all a little bit differently. Excuse me, a little hydration break there. So Steve, I'll repeat the question. What is the biggest, most impactful thing you've changed your mind on this year because of a podcast guest conversation? Yeah, this is a great one. So I had Kate Reid on. Kate Reid is the founder of Loon, which is the most impressive croissant business in Australia, maybe the world. But Kate has such a wonderful personal story. She wrote a book, which was fantastic. God, the name of it escapes me right now. But essentially, her whole journey, like she started in aerospace engineering in the F1 industry for Williams Racing. And ultimately, after personal challenge and adversity and a crazy battle with depression, anorexia, Kate found her way into a love for baking and has built an empire off the back of it. And, I sat in the studio with Kate. She's such a bubbly, amazing personality. And we had this incredibly honest and revealing conversation. And just one of the things she said to the end of the chat is, she's in business now with a brother, Cam. And he's had a completely different path to where they are now compared to her. And just her message around it doesn't always happen the way that you think it's going to happen. And, we don't always have the same path as the people that we aspire to be like. But when you believe and you hold that belief and you move towards it and you have patience, it happens. It can happen. It's certainly possible for you. And I just love this idea that like we can think we're on the right path. We can think we know what the path is going to look like. And I'm such a stubborn person by nature that at times in my life I've had an idea of how it's meant to work out. And when it doesn't, you can be so hard on yourself. And I think remembering that message, holding the faith that there is still that opportunity there for you, that if it's meant for you, it won't miss you, that if you keep working towards it, that if you hold the belief that it's going to happen, regardless of how long it takes, if it means enough to you, you'll continue on the path. And then when the path that you're on towards the destination that you want to reach isn't working out the way that you planned, sometimes it's okay to go, hey, this is not the path. I need to try another way. There's an amazing guy named Boyd Vardy who's a lion tracker in South Africa and runs a Londolozi retreat ranch. And I remember him on a podcast a couple of years ago, a podcast that I return to every year to re-listen to because it's just packs full of so many gems. I remember him saying that the path of not here is as important as the right path because it teaches you lessons. And when you're on the path of not here, what do? You just try another path. You figure out, well, if I want to reach that destination or that thing so badly, and the way that I'm going right now is not taking me there, well, then I've got to try something else. And I think that that's empowering. You know, Jimmy Carr says that life happens when we have other plans. And I think that that's important on this too. Like, you know, sometimes the thing that you thought you'd achieve in 3 takes 5, and along the 5-year journey, there's a bunch of other really important and powerful things that pop up for you that become really integral in your life experience. And so, yeah, I love what Kate allowed me to feel, which is this sense of surrender, that I don't have to achieve it the way that I thought I would. That sometimes it happens in ways that we never expected, but ultimately allows our dream to be bigger, better, more immersive than we ever realized. So I think it's just in 2 words, letting go. Hattie Boydell, what have you learned about yourself lately? Yeah, this is a really interesting one that's popped up the last couple of months. Mentioned right at the top of the show, whatever I've been experiencing from a health perspective at the moment that I'm sort of struggling to get answers for has given me like a health anxiety that I briefly touched on in an episode with my mate Joey not too long ago, but it's revealed a bit of a fragility in me that I'd never experienced before. You know, I have had a lot of health experiences over my 29, nearly 30 years, in which I've handled with real positivity and optimism at every corner. But for some reason, I know the reason, having felt so lucky and so blessed, having so many beautiful people and amazing things in my life that I've worked so hard to have, the fear of losing those things has at times felt really crippling over the last couple of months and has tested me. And, you know, in my own hypocrisy has tested beliefs of mine in which I have preached on this podcast and written about. And, you know, ultimately this idea of you can be anything, so why not be positive? Like, regardless of the situation, find the positive in it, has been tested over the course of the last couple of months, in which I've feared losing all the things that I hold dear. And, you know, it's been a new learning for me. It's been a new experience because it's challenged me. It's stopped me in my tracks. It's put me in a place of negativity, which I think has at times sent me on a bit of a spiral, but ultimately I feel I'm coming out the other side of that, where, yes, I'm hungry for answers. I want answers. I want to feel like myself again. I want to have my energy back. I want to feel like I can go and run and work out without worrying about how it absolutely drains me and puts me on the couch like a potato for the next 6 hours. But more than anything, I think that I'm learning not to become my own worst enemy again, that I'm trying to lean into that positivity, that hope, you know, because without it all, it feels a little bit hopeless. And so, you know, I'm certainly not in any kind of dire consequences. I'm well enough to be recording a podcast and doing a lot of great things and spending time with the people I love, but it's been really frustrating. It's been testing, and that uncertainty that we hate as human beings at times is so bloody annoying. It's so frustrating. You want certainty, you want answers. And so, yeah, the health anxiety stuff has been new. But with love and support of my closest people and, a bit of faith in myself and some past experiences to lean on. I feel like I'm finding that flow and that balance again. And so hopefully over the course of coming weeks, months, I'm feeling much better, have my energy back, but I've certainly learnt the lesson that I think I have burnt myself out this last year. And, we can be really hard on ourselves about that because we follow people on social media and we see how much they're doing, achieving their output, and we go, well, they're doing that, I should be able to do that. And if I can't do that, well, then maybe I'm inferior. Well, we're all different. We all have different amount of energy and output that we're able to achieve. And sometimes you need to listen to yourself. Sometimes you need to recognize that, you have strengths they don't. You also have weaknesses that maybe they don't. And I think I found my limits this year, more mentally than anything. So yeah, I'm working through that health anxiety and I'm feeling much more on top of it. So thanks for that question, Hattie. Sally Gould, how has your definition of success changed over time? It's just simplified, I think. I think my idea of success is that it's really about those simple things, like I said, family and relationships being the major one, health, more simply than ever before. I think maybe I deemed success for a long time as like health performance as opposed to just having your health. And so it's simplified and it's I've dropped it down a couple pegs, I don't need to be doing something extraordinary all the time. I just need to be comfortable in my health, my happiness, my relationships, and more so the doing of something than the achieving of something. So, if the podcast, if I record an episode every week and have an amazing conversation with a great guest, regardless of the numbers, I'm deeming that as a success. Basically just valuing effort over reward, valuing quality over quantity of connection, etc. So it's more in the doing, in the feeling, in the being, than in the achieving, the knowing, the having, It's all the things that I can control. So success has been simplified and I love that. I feel like that's a little life hack when you get to that point. Doesn't mean I'm not striving. Let me say that. It certainly doesn't mean that I'm not striving for more or to be better or to grow or to prosper in new ways. But my self-worth, my self-worth and my purpose isn't dependent on that. I love this question. Andrew Hamilton, incredibly funny guy, so I knew I wasn't going to get something super serious out of him. He said, "You are one of the nicest blokes I've met, but you are also a real estate agent, which makes you a gigantic cunt." What would you say is your percentage split between nice guy and gigantic cunt piece of shit? I love the question. Real estate is such a funny industry. I can see why so many people dislike real estate agents because, well, firstly, the major thing is it's such an emotionally charged business for buyers and sellers. If you're a seller, you want the most amount of money for your home because you've worked really hard to have it, to obtain it, and you've risked purchasing that place and doing those renovations or making those improvements, and ultimately the result that you achieve for the home is super important. It's going to depend on the kind of life that you, your partner, your kids, whatever network of people that are around you get to enjoy over the course of the next few years. And so the extra $20,000 in a result, or even $10,000, $5,000 at times, can be the difference between you and your family getting the new car that you need next year because your family's growing, or having the extra bedroom in the next place you buy, or your kids going to the school you want them to go to. So as a seller, it's emotionally charged. As a buyer, is incredibly emotionally charged too, because you're putting your hard-earned money up for a place that is probably going to be your home or an investment that you hold for at least the next 5 or 10, maybe even longer, the rest of your life years. And so there's a lot that goes into that decision. There's a lot that goes into that process. And when you feel like it's maybe new, or it's something that even you've only done 2 or 3 times in your life, if you're further into the buying cycle, you're not doing it every day like the real estate agent is, who's transacting on a lot of sales or has that day-to-day experience of working through these conversations and situations. So you don't get to approach it with as much calm. And then to put on top of that, you've got all of this emotional energy that goes into it. And then you get some agent who cares more about their commission than they do about the people involved, who prefers to make a bigger paycheck than have, honest intentions and put their head on the pillow peacefully at night because they know they've operated with integrity. When you get somebody who doesn't have integrity, who lies to you, blatantly lies to you in a lot of cases in real estate, and tells you what you want to hear as opposed to what you need to hear, then yeah, I can understand why people fucking hate people in this business. I remember getting into the business as a young guy, and I had the greasy haircut and the greasy outfit, and I really looked like a gigantic piece of shit. But the thing I can say for myself is I've always operated with the utmost integrity, and how much value that is worth coming from the horse's mouth. Probably not very little, but I believe that when you look at the reviews and all those things and talk to the people I've worked with, they'd attest to that for me, it's always been really important. I will never be, and you say never, but I will never have the goal to be like the number one selling real estate agent or making the most money. I make a really comfortable wage in a business that gives me quite a bit of day-to-day flexibility, but unfortunately at times consumes a little bit too much of your life because the phone never turns off and there's always email inquiries and calls and text messages. But it's certainly not the hardest business in the world. I find it's got far more positives than it does negatives as someone who's in the industry operating as an agent. And so how do I balance being a nice person and a gigantic cunt piece of shit, as you put it, Andrew, is just remembering who I am and why I do what I do. I love the feeling of being able to put my head on the pillow at night and sleep peacefully because I was honest with people and I did the right thing. And that means that sometimes I'm not going to tell someone their house is worth as much as they'd like to hear, and they're going to do business with someone else who's willing to tell them that. And that's okay. I don't need to get every bit of business that I walk into, and I'm not going to lie to somebody in the process of them purchasing a house. And so I believe that all of the clients that work with me are very comfortable with that fact and have had, usually in most cases, some negative experiences in the past so that they can recognize and see the honesty and the integrity in which I move with. And so I think you just got to remember your morals. And I love, to many degrees, I feel like it has been such an edge for me because I know plenty of great real estate agents, but we all know a few bad ones. And I think that when you operate with honesty and you walk into someone's house, it's refreshing, let me tell you, and they comment on it. And so I love that I've been able to be me in this industry. It's taken me a while to find the way in which I felt like I could be okay with the business I had to walk away from. It really frustrated me when I was younger, walking away from business because, they'd been lied to by other agents and I was honest about the price that I thought it was worth, etc. But over time you realise that, your integrity, your values are more important, and I'm glad that I've stuck to those throughout the course of my career, and eventually that paid off. So, I love your question. I love the humour behind it. But I also think that in any world in which, same as social media, like it's a world in which there is a whole heap of bullshit, when you can be honest and you can play the long game, I think that there is so much success if you're willing to be patient, because eventually the cream rises to the top. Zachy Lomax, would you rather lose all your memories or never be able to make new ones? Such a great question, because I love looking back on memories. I am so blessed to have so many rich, fulfilling, happy memories that I can look back on. I can't tell you how much over the course of the last couple of weeks, Christmas, New Year's, Soph and I have sat there and looked at photos from our honeymoon, our trip, and just reminisced on some of the best moments. And so I would be devastated to lose those. But in saying that, I would forego all of my memories of the past to be able to create new ones. I think it is the optimism and the hope of what's to come that allows us to really lean into the challenges of life and get through the other side of them. And I'm optimistic that whilst I've had the most amazing years of past, that the most amazing years of future are ahead of me. And so I think with that, with the ability to make new memories, have new experiences, create new moments, I think that we have a purpose to keep moving forward. And so I think it'd be very hard to forego that. And I think that anyone, despite how good your last few years have been, I think you should back yourself that your best ones are ahead of you. Adam Reynolds, best piece of advice you have received this year? This is a good one. Soph said to me a couple of weeks ago, just in all this frustration around my health and what I can't do that I used to be able to do a couple months ago, and the energy I feel like I've been lacking, which I formerly had. Soph said to me, you need to be kinder to yourself. You need to give yourself more grace. And it's simple, but it's true. I think that most of us are harder on ourselves than we are on other people. We hold ourselves to higher expectations than we hold others to. And at times, that's really valuable, right? If you want to get the best out of yourself, you sometimes need to hold yourself to really high standards. You sometimes need to be really harsh on yourself. But I think when you've developed that kind of discipline, it's really hard to learn how to be kind to yourself. It's very challenging to be able to go, hey, it's okay that you're not at your best right now. You can't be at your best every day. Former guest of the podcast, his name is eluding me, is an absolute legend, Rich Davini, former Navy SEAL from the US. I remember Rich said to me, he said, mate, there's a reason why we can't be at peak all the time. Because peak is the little tip at the top of the mountain. The rest of it is most of life. And he said, so I think that we should aim to be optimal. And that is this balance zone in which we find ourselves performing above the average, but ultimately finding that time, that space, the ability to be a little bit kinder to ourselves, to realize that not every day is peak performance, not every day is you at your best. Not every year is you at your best. And so to be kinder to myself, to have a little bit of grace for myself is a little bit of advice that I'm going to keep close to my chest in 2026, that's for sure. This is a great segue for Sam Fricker's question. How do you keep leveling up year on year? I don't think you do, Sam. I think that it's incredible to aspire to that. I think aspiring to big goals and being lofty in your thought process and, looking to reach new peaks and scale new mountains is all well and good and should be encouraged. But I think that you have to be okay with that not every year is that year. And, sometimes you achieve A's in some areas and D's in others. And sometimes you just average out C's and B's. I don't think it's realistic to think that every year is our best. I think athletes are a great example. And I say athletes because you are one, Sam. That, athletes have years in which they're off. They have years in which they're at the peak of the mountain. Some athletes are consistent and then really struggle post-career or have struggled at times early in their career. I think that we are human, we are flawed, we are susceptible to challenge, change, evolution, sometimes for better or for worse. I think aspiring for your best year on year, is a noble pursuit. And I think having the kindness or the grace to recognise that despite your efforts, the rewards weren't there this year is a real skill. And so, I think I'm aspiring that 2026 will be my best yet. But I'm mindful that I'm not going to hold myself so harshly to those standards that my efforts aren't rewarded to. Sorry guys, I feel like this is a bit clunky with my phone, but my laptop is currently occupied by Soph, so I am just rolling with it. Jack Henderson. What's the most underrated skill a young person can learn to become more successful in life? Man, I think learning to say no. There's so much emphasis on saying yes all the time. Saying yes to every opportunity, to every request for a catch-up. And I think that there's value in that. I think this really is context dependent on how you're wired as a human. Like, I am wired to be super social. I, for most of my life, will have identified myself as an extrovert, as an outgoing person, as someone who is driven by taking on as many opportunities and challenges and responsibilities as I can. But I think over the course of the last couple of years, it's drained me. I don't have any regrets over taking on the book in 2025 because I am really proud of what I put together. But mate, it tested me. I think I underestimated how much work and effort and I guess how much lag time there is sometimes in working on a book. So what I mean by that is there were days where I'd sit down, because typically I'd only have like 2 days a week to work on this. It might have been a couple of hours one morning or one night or on a Sunday, and, in and amongst all my other work. And so I'd sit down on a Sunday and I'm like, okay, I've got all day to write. And it would take me 4 hours to actually get writing, because I couldn't think of the way I wanted to communicate a story or an idea. And, I was sitting there thinking about, how did that thing from when I was 10 years old actually play out again? And so there was so much failure to launch on some of those work days that there's a far bigger challenge than I recognised it would be. The edit process and making the timeline of the book make sense. It's a memoir where we played in these kind of 2 parallel timelines. They were all skills that I had to learn as a writer that I hadn't yet appreciated, because I was so naive and optimistic that I was just going to, roll into some kind of momentum that made this process easy and enjoyable and light, that it didn't quite work that way. And so what I learned over the course of the last couple of months, it is such a skill to be able to say no to those things. A skill to say no to opportunities, because I think in saying no to opportunities, you have to be grossly optimistic that those opportunities aren't going to expire after today, after the present moment, that the opportunity that has been presented to you today, I should say, that doesn't feel right for you right now, or that you don't have the space or time to give it the attention it deserves. I think you have to get comfortable believing that opportunity, if it's right for you, will still be there in a year's to 5 years' time. The same way that it's amazing, like I want more friend catch-ups this year, but at times this year I had to just be really isolated to be able to get some of these things done, because I'd taken on so much responsibility. So saying no is such a skill. But maybe for the person who's at the polar opposite end of the spectrum to me, in which they are quite introverted and struggle to be social and struggle to get out, who typically finds it easy to say no because they don't believe that they are worthy of the opportunity, or they don't have the social energy to catch up with a friend, maybe has to learn to say yes more. And so I think it's maybe the skill, maybe I'll correct myself here and I'll say the skill is self-awareness, recognizing who you are and how you operate, so that you can change the things you want to change and have the serenity to accept the things that you cannot change. The serenity prayer, I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago on the pod, which I won't get word for word because I'm not religiously educated as such, but, having the courage to change the things you can and the serenity to accept the things that you can't. That there is, I think it's such a beautiful sentiment for anyone in life, religious or not, because that's where most of our challenges come from, right? The things that we know we can change that we just don't want to commit to, or the things that we know we can't that just fucking torture us. And so many answers in there, but I'd say ultimately it's self-awareness is a skill. Learning to read yourself and read the play in how your life has unfolded in years, months, weeks have passed. Learn from those experiences and go, yeah, what do I need to say yes to in order to get more of what I want from life? And what do I need to say no to in order to preserve the things that are really valuable and have more time and space in those things? I think if you master that, you master your time, and ultimately, if you master your time, you master fulfillment. I just read Jack's question. God, I'm clunky. My brain is a little bit foggy today. Bear with me. Andrea Clark. From all of your guests this year, what's one piece of advice you have for your listeners to action in 2026? I've actually got 2 things, Andrea. The first is much of your advice. That was the first thing that came to my head when you sent me this question. For those who don't know Andrea or haven't listened to that episode, I really highly encourage you to go back to it. Andrea wrote an incredible book. She's written a few books, but she wrote an incredible book this year called Adapt. It's all about adaptability and the importance of adaptability in a changing world. I think that we are in, whether for better or worse, it's debatable, very challenging times in which things are changing at very quick paces, very consistently, in ways in which none of us have ever expected or experienced before, in ways that most of us feel inequipped or uncertain about what the future looks like. And so what skill could we all really develop? What thing could we all really learn? Adaptability. Being okay with that, being prepared for that, learning how to sink your teeth into changing times and recognizing what you need to do to move well with that, to succeed in light of that, to be able to read the play as things are changing, as the environment, whether it be culturally, politically, socially, is changing. And so I think that AI is the big one. We are, my mum sent me a video on Instagram the other day, sorry to out you here, mum, of a baby being picked up by an eagle and flown away into the sky, in which I could recognize very clearly that mum had just been AI'd. But mum was just so perplexed that this poor baby had been picked up by a dog and by I think there was one of a baby and one of a dog, which is why I muddled that there, and flown away by an eagle. And so we're in these changing times in which many of us are somewhat starting to read the play. Some of us are going to lag and be a little bit behind. And so I think we need to learn to adapt pretty quickly. The other one, which is, I think, just a real personal reminder for me at the moment, is I had Larry Emder on the show this year. Now, if you follow this show mostly through clips or through YouTube, you wouldn't have seen Larry's episode because, unfortunately, he was one of 2 episodes in which I lost the visuals for. He and Jack Archdale, Jarchi, are recorded in the same week, and we had a malfunction with the hard drive and we lost all the footage. But thankfully, we had the audio backed up. So you wouldn't have seen a lot of clips online about this. But Larry's been one of the most consistent faces in Australian media the last few decades. He, is the current host of The Morning Show, host of The Chase, was, the face of some of the biggest game shows and, most enjoyable talk shows of the last few decades. He's also the most axed guy in TV history, which he loves to laugh about and promote. He wrote a book called Happy as Larry, and we sat down for a really fun, enjoyable, light-hearted conversation. And I think that I just took an amazing lesson from it. Larry is very humble. And so he loves to say that he's not great at many things, right? Which is him being incredibly humble because he's amazing at what he does. But I love that he's put his success down to just recognizing there are so many, like I said about real estate, there are plenty of pricks in the business of TV and media. But he's like, I've just always focused on being a really good guy. And he believes that that's a huge part of his success, having just been a great human being and showing up consistently and operating with integrity and with his values close to his heart. He believes that he's, been given the opportunity to continue winning and continue working with people because he's a good guy. And I think being a good person is so underrated. We talk about this quite a lot. Like, I've had so many frustrations around this show. My frustrations being, we've had some amazing guests on this podcast. We will be so close to 300 episodes when this launches. I think by the end of Jan, we'll be at 300 episodes. And that's, certainly not as many as some shows, but I'd say compared to the average, 300 is a lot of episodes. I've consistently showed up and recorded an episode and released an episode of this nearly every week for 6 years. And maybe the first 2 or 3 years were so terrible and average as I was learning, but I'm really proud of the last couple. And at times I've been so frustrated why it hasn't grown at the rate that I thought it would. Why other people in which I'm really happy for and are proud of and have seen grow and evolve around me have grown faster than I have despite my many years working at this. And maybe it's got more to do with my skill set than I care to admit. Maybe it's got something to do with people not enjoying it as much as I enjoy it or finding as much value in it as I do. But ultimately, the reminder of Larry's message is that there are ways in which you can grow much quicker. You can rage bait. You can have the titles that make people feel in terror and in fear and like they can't miss the episode and they're being clickbaited into something that's quite a mediocre conversation. You can get people on with extreme views to talk about extreme political or social beliefs in which you don't really see eye to eye with, and you can have those beliefs of your own, ultimately all in an effort to enrage part of the population and fall into the favour of the other half. But that's not me. It's never been me. I never started this show because I wanted a certain amount of followers or I wanted to make a certain amount of money from it. Yes, I was optimistic that it could be a chart-topping show and reach millions of people and have an impact on people's lives, or that people could enjoy listening to a guest share their story or hear a conversation that uplifted or inspired them to make some kind of change or go on some kind of journey in their life. But I never did it because I felt like I needed something from it. All I ever wanted from this show was just to feel connected to conversation and people's stories, because that's the thing that I loved. It's the thing I've always loved. And so being okay with the fact that, hey, this might take me 30 years. It might take me 30 years to get to a place where this could be my job. Maybe it will never be my job. Maybe it will never pay me the money that allows me to support my family and have a life. But if it gets to be the thing that I'm really proud of, if it continues to be the thing that I did with integrity, then that's a win for me. You know, I think that idea of nice guys or good people finish last, man, I hate that. I will say quickly, I'll stipulate, Matthew McConaughey in his new book, Poems and Prayers, which I've not read, but I've heard a couple of excerpts from, talks about the difference between a good person and a nice guy. And he says that basically a nice guy is a yes man. He's just nice to everyone despite whether it conflicts with his values or morals. And that's not what I'm talking about. Being a good person, being an integral, decent human being who stands up for what they believe in, walks away from what they don't, has the courage to stand up when people around them need them to stand up, has the courage to call out bullshit when they see bullshit, but does it all from a place of honest values and integrity. That's a winner in life. And that winner, unfortunately, doesn't get all the treats, the favours and the rewards as early as maybe somebody who's willing to compromise their integrity does. But I certainly believe they get to enjoy them for a lot longer. And they don't poison themselves from the inside out through complete inauthenticity. And so I'm really comfortable with this journey taking me a long time to get to where I want to go. I'm very comfortable with never ever getting there. I wasn't so comfortable with that a couple of years ago, but I've learned that, as Larry Emder said, better to be a good person. And so I love that advice from Larry, and I'd encourage that upon everyone. Better to be who you are and take longer to get there than who you're not, get there quickly and fall short of being the kind of person that you respect. Richard de Crepigny, how much is enough? Yeah, Richard sent me a bit of context for this question. He said that society and their incapability to answer this question is at the core of why we have achieved so much as a society, as a world, as a culture, but it is also the downfall of us, not knowing when to stop, the self-destruction that comes with needing more and more and more all the time, despite how much we already have. It is such a double-edged sword. Wanting more, being ambitious is incredibly important, but to what end? So how much enough is enough? That is a challenging question to answer. But I guess my answer to that question is, if you play the right games, the infinite games, then there's never enough. What I mean by that is, if you play the game of family, there will never be some kind of destructive end to wanting more time with your family, I don't believe. If you play the game of pursuing purpose, I don't think that it's dangerous to pursue doing things that give you more meaning and provide more value to the world. If you play the game of health, looking after yourself, really, to a degree, you can't get enough of that. And so I think, of course, you can play the extremes and, exclude all other things from your life. But I think the answer to that question, whilst there very much isn't one, is to think about it differently. And I think the way to think about it is, if you play the right games, you rig your life for fulfillment. Play the right games. Know what's important to you. Know what you value. And lean into those things as much as possible. That's where the win is. Eddie Nelson, what did you learn about yourself this year? Well, whilst I spoke about being quite burnt out and run down by doing so much this year, it also taught me that I am capable of being the man that I want to be. That when the time comes that I'm a dad and I have responsibilities to my children, to my wife, to my work, to all of the things that I've volunteered myself for in life and chosen to pursue, that despite a little bit of burnout and fatigue, I'm quite capable of it. I've tested myself this year. I've really stretched myself, and I'm really proud that I haven't lost my values or my integrity in the meantime. That despite feeling like, oh, maybe I bit off a little bit more than I could chew, I chewed it well. I was able to squeeze the juice out of it. I was able to do a bunch of things this year that I'm really proud of and continue to be the person that I wanted to be. 2025 was jam-packed full of a lot of things, and it's taught me a lot about myself, and I'm really proud of how I've come out at the end of this year. And so with a few adjustments, I think I can refine that to be even better in the years ahead. And so I love that when we come up against challenges, when we feel like we have stretched ourselves, and when we come through the other side, it does teach us what we're capable of. It is when belief becomes proof. And I'm really proud of what I proved to myself this year. Joey Plum, what's the single most defining moment of 2025 for you? Joey's one of my best mates. It's got to be my wedding. I think that idea that who you choose to spend your life with is the most important decision you'll ever make is some of the truest words ever spoken. The wedding felt so significant, so beautiful, so meaningful. I took the advice of so many people who talked to me about your wedding day, and the one piece of advice I continued to receive time after time was that the day goes so fast, so make sure that you're present. And we spoke about this a little bit on the episode we did together, Joey, but when I saw Soph at the top of the aisle, where we got married was like on this beautiful garden looking out to the Mediterranean Sea in the south of France at a beautiful hotel called the Grand Hotel de Cap Ferret, This beautiful rock path up between the gardens. I saw Soph right at the top, her and her dad ready to walk down the aisle. I heard the music, La Vie en Rose by Edith Piaf, start to play, and I turned away for a second and closed my eyes. 3 deep breaths. Cleared all of the noise of the things that we needed to organise so that the day went smoothly, making sure I'd remembered my bow tie on the way to the venue, that I had our rings to hand to my dad because he was going to hand them to us, that, I had my vows, all those things. I'm like, I'm here, everything is sorted. Be in the moment. This is the most important moment of your life so far. And when I turned around, I feel like I can remember every little piece of the day like there is a video movie memory inside of my head that is playing frame by frame of everything that happened. And I feel so lucky that I can remember it that way because it was the best day of my life. It was so enjoyable with the people that we love, so meaningful and so significant. And I feel incredibly lucky to have found a person that I feel so loved by, that I have so much fun and have so many great memories with, and that we get to live life together. I feel like I have won the lottery 1,000,000 times over. And so that moment will arguably be the most important moment of the rest of my life. And I'm so glad that I have a great memory of it, because it made all of the years before and all of the desires to have what I now have, the hard work to get there, to appreciate it, to enjoy it, to be the man that I am in it, it made it all really worth it. Brett Canellan, how do you deal with those times when you either fail or don't reach a goal that you set because you maybe didn't show up and give it 100% like you should have? Terrible feeling that, isn't it? When you commit to something, work towards it, but you don't work towards it with the ferocity or the commitment that you can, and then you fall short. I think we're all guilty of that at some stage in our life or in some area of our life, and it's a crushing feeling. When you get to the end of let's use marathon prep as an example, and you fall short of the time that you wanted to run. Your legs give out at 35k, and you remember that I didn't do too many runs over 30k in the prep for this. I told myself I'd be all right. it hits like a ton of bricks. But then you remember that, with all things going well and being the kind of person who doesn't shy away from things that are hard, you'll be back here again. And you just got to learn the lesson and apply it next time. And sometimes the lesson isn't applied to the same challenge. It's applied to the next one. It's applied to when you've got a great guest coming on the podcast and you want it to be an amazing, deeply honest and meaningful episode. You do the research. You read the book. You listen to the other things that they've spoken on because you want to ask the best questions. And so I've got plenty of those moments in the last couple of years. In fact, I will say that I operated from the age of 16, 17 through to 24 with very little commitment to the goals and the kind of person that I wanted to become. And I paid the price for it. I felt like I fell short of a lot of the expectations I had for myself. And yeah, like I said before, you got to be kind to yourself and go, hey, find my feet, go again. But you've got to learn the lesson. For a long time, I didn't learn the lesson until I did. Until I realized that not learning the lesson is costly. That not learning the lesson fills you with more regret than it does reward. That you learn a lot from those failures. And some of those regrets are regrets that you'll always have. But if not now, when? So I'd say that question, if not now, when? If I don't learn from my failure now, when will I learn? Will I ever learn? And if I don't learn, and if I never turn the tide, do what I need to do in order to be who I want to be, what price will I pay for that? Ultimately, that kind of end of life regret, when you look back on who you could have been and ultimately who you weren't, that's a kind of regret that you don't get the chance to right those wrongs. And so I would say that don't be scared of falling short. Be scared of never changing. Be scared of never learning. So if not now, when? That's the question, my friend. Ellidy Pullin, what was the best part of your 2025? I touched on it just before, the wedding and the honeymoon, right? When I looked back on 2025 this year, I did as we all do, that end of year 2025 in review post. And ultimately, there were heaps of things I was proud of. I did a lot from a career perspective that I was really proud of this year. But more than anything, the thing that I just wanted to reflect on and continue to think about was the memories that I'll cherish forever. The memories created on that trip. And I know that travel is such a luxury. And in plenty of years where I couldn't afford it. This year, worked really hard and were able to afford it and go away and have an amazing time. And it reminded me that I want to work hard to have more of those moments, because the experience of being in a new place with someone you love, experiencing new things and making new memories, regardless of the scale, regardless of where it is, but doing new things with people that you love just makes a life rich in so many memories. And so that was, without a doubt, the highlight of my year. And I cannot wait to do it again. So where next? I don't know. When next? I'm not sure. But more memories with Soph and the people that I hold dear is on the bucket list, not only for 2026, but for every year of life. And, we have so many amazing memories from the trip. One I'll actually share with you because I think it's a bit of fun. So there was Austin Butler was promoting that movie, the Darren Aronofsky movie. I don't know the name of it, but essentially gets caught up in his mate's criminal business, and he's on the run from these people who are trying to catch him and kill him. And it's kind of like an action comedy, I believe. I haven't watched it, but he had this line. He did a Subway Talks with I think it's Raheem is the guy's name. Anyways, I'm stumbling along this story. Austin Butler shared a quote that the director of Elvis, Baz Luhrmann, gave him. Baz Luhrmann said to him, "Go out there and make a fool of yourself. Go out there and try things. Do the things that scare you. Do the things that you feel might embarrass you, that are ultimately going to be rich in experiences and lessons and memories." And so I'd heard this interview whilst I was over in Europe, and I just love that idea. Go out there and make a fool of yourself. It doesn't matter what people think. People will forget. But it matters that you showed up and you tried, that you had a good time in the process, that you maybe stumbled over your feet, but people forget tomorrow, but you learned the lesson, you got the story. You're able to tell it, you're able to share it. And so I remember writing it in my journal while I was away. Go out there and make a fool of yourself. And Soph and I, on one of our last nights in Paris, had booked tickets to go see a cabaret show called La Nouvelle Eve. And we went for a dinner. It was probably the heaviest dinner we had while we were away. We had cheeseburgers, and I had French toast and ice cream after. And I really packed the food in. I enjoyed myself at dinner. And I felt so full, almost to the point of feeling sick. But we went to this show and we're just sitting relaxing. I'm having a Coke Zero. She's having a champagne. And we're watching these incredible performers, like singing, dancing, but also feats of acrobatics and amazing things unfold on the stage in front of us. And then the main singer-dancer of the show, she comes out. I'm pretty sure she was Aussie, but she was amazing at what she does. She comes out about 3/4 of the way through the show. And she introduces herself and thanks everyone for being here. And we're in this gorgeous old French arena, maybe 200 people inside. And Soph and I had seats by absolute chance. They're not assigned seats, but we were there a little bit early and they put us right up at the front of the stage, but off to the side, off to the left. And she goes, all right, now we're at a part of the show where we're going to get you involved. And you always get a little bit nervous when they say that because you're thinking, far out. Do I want to be up on stage in front of all these people I don't know? Even someone who's as confident as me when it comes to speaking on stage. I'm like, I don't know what they're going to ask me to do. But I'm like, look, there's a room full of 200 people. Doubt that they're going to pick me. She explains that she's going to get 4 handsome gentlemen up on stage to do something in front of the audience. And so I kind of slide down a little bit further in my chair, look down to my feet, and try to stay out of clear sight. She picks a guy who's in probably his mid-30s, who's right at the front of the stage in the center, a guy just behind him to the left who's maybe in his 50s, an older gentleman who's quite close to me, to the left of stage, and then I think, she's just picked him. Surely she's not going to pick me who's right next to him. But the older guy gets up and walks past me to go to the stage. And she goes, and you can't look away from me. I need you to come up here on the stage. And I'm like, oh my God, you're kidding. And I had a feeling it was going to have to do something with dancing. It's a cabaret show. And I'll say that, I feel like I'm good at a few things. Dancing is not one of them. I've got 2 left feet. I have no rhythm. I have no grace when I dance. In fact, I'm appalling. And so I was so nervous. It's probably I would have preferred to have sung on stage than danced. But I get up there and she stands in front of us and she's like, I'm going to teach you guys a dance routine and you're going to follow along. So we start doing this dance routine. It's a bit of a step dance routine and kind of looks like it's from a cabaret. And we do that for about a minute on stage. We kind of all find a bit of rhythm. And I think, thank God that's over. And then she goes, now for the catch. You guys are all going to perform that dance routine on stage solo for the crowd. And I'm thinking, oh my God, no way. And I'm kind of thinking, maybe I'll just half-ass it and do it so it's comfortable and I don't make a fool of myself, right? Because that's, we're trying to protect our ego. And the first guy goes, guy that's in his mid-30s, I still remember his name. His name's Greg. He's from New York. And he comes out and he's got some fucking flair about him. He's having a crack. And I'm like, you son of a bitch. Now I'm going to have a crack too. Because if you have a crack and I don't, then I look like a dickhead. Now I look like a fool. And so I'm like, all right, game on. Greg gets a huge round of applause. The second guy goes, he's got a French name in his mid-50s. And he has a bloody crack. He's shaking his ass for the stage. Now, what I've realised by this point is we're all so nervous that we've all forgotten the dance routine. So this has turned into just go out there for a minute and give it your best performance. Go solo, have a crack, try to get a rouse out of the crowd. And the second guy gets a massive round of applause. And then the spotlight hits me. And I'm like, fuck, I've got to do something different here to wow this crowd. So I think I'm going to start with my back to the crowd, do an impressive spin around and reveal, and I'm just going to give it everything I've got. And when I tell you, I don't know what I did for the first 30 seconds because I was so nervous, but somehow my feet were moving like fucking Happy Feet, the little penguin, and I was dancing around and the crowd was clapping, and then I thought I need something spectacular to finish, and I don't know even how I did it, but I sprinted from the right side to the left side of stage, dived out on my belly like a penguin, like Happy Feet, and slid in a 360 around onto my side and finished with my elbow on the ground, head resting on my hand, right in front of Soph, my new wife, who I told the crowd about when I introduced myself on the mic, and got the biggest round of applause and so many cheers and excitement for that last move that it was just the most exhilarating and fun feeling. And then the gentleman after me, Bruce, who was an older fella from Australia, from Melbourne, who's a former dancer, him and his wife were former ballroom dancers, had an absolute crack too. And his routine was very different. He couldn't slide along the floor. He was in his 70s or 80s, but had such a great crack at it. And Bruce won. But when we left, there were people coming up to us, shaking our hands and just rejoicing in the fact that we'd gone out there and had fun. And I said to Soph, it's so funny that I'd seen that quote, go out there and make a fool of yourself. What did he say? I'm going to read it for you because I've got it here somewhere. That's right. It was, embarrassment is an underexplored emotion. Go out there and make a fool of yourself. And I'm so glad I made a fool of myself because it became such a fun story and memory for us in our honeymoon, one of our last nights in Paris that, we'll always laugh about and look back on and have fond memories of. So, Ellidy, in a long-winded answer to your question, it was the best couple of weeks of my life. Had such a great time. Heston Russell, what belief did you start the year with that has changed? Yeah, I started this year and, have had for a lot of the last few years, this belief that everything happens for a reason. I think it's kind of what I alluded to before, that when you're going through difficult times, being able to find some kind of reason for them gives you what you need to get through them. But as I've gotten older, as I've learned a little bit more about life, a lot of the empathy that I have is because of this podcast. Being able to sit down with different people from different walks of life and have conversations and hear their sides of their unique stories. You learn that life is really unfair and that I don't think there's any bigger reason for a child being diagnosed with cancer or a parent having to bury their child or losing your partner 10 years into what you hope to be a 50-year marriage or for any of the real atrocities that happen here in the world. I don't think that it's fair that where you're born dictates the quality of your life. But there are truths to life that are frankly unfair. And I don't think that they have any kind of bigger reason. But I think the positive spin on that is that the beauty of having air in your lungs and a heartbeat and waking up tomorrow is reason enough to, regardless of the challenge, go out there and live your life, to have a reason to get up again. We're so blessed. We're so blessed that every day we have this opportunity that is called life, that despite what we're struggling with, despite what we've been challenged by, despite how hard it is at times, there's no bigger reason for your challenges. But there is absolutely every reason why you should get up, get out of bed, and do what you can. Find what joy you can in the life that you have, because I think it is the biggest blessing. In fact, I know it is the biggest blessing to have air in your lungs and a heartbeat, and I feel so lucky for this little life of mine that that is enough reason to keep going. That's all my questions from 75% of the guests who answered me back. I want to firstly thank all of those guests who have been a part of the fabric of the show this year. It means the world to me that you guys come on, give me your time, give yourselves honestly and earnestly to the audience. I love this. I love this show. I have big plans for it this year with some amazing guests that we're currently in conversation with and locking down dates and times to sit down with. I appreciate your grace in the episodes we missed this year while I was away on my honeymoon and at my wedding. But I feel so thankful for this in the last 6 years and, for what will soon be 300 episodes. And I'm sure that in the next 300, there'll be a whole heap of new lessons, great meaning, inspiration and purpose that will be afforded to not only me, but so many of you who listen in through the great guests that come on this show. So thank you. Best wishes for 2026 and the years beyond. Whenever you're seeing this, I appreciate you. Take it easy.